listening to Blind Shovel, an arts and music podcast. Today I sit down with producer and musician Joe Kelly. Hope you enjoy. It isn't always clear where it begins and ends. Let's see. All right, so what have you been working on today?
Today I started working on some new drums for a track that's on an album I'd like to release later this year.
Really?
Yeah.
Real drums?
Real drums.
That you played?
That I played.
Huh. And what's the album?
I've got 3 different albums that have just really been sitting in a vault and a bank for the last 5 years, I'd say. And after my old band broke up, Fred and I just kept writing music and putting music together, and just really wasn't focused on like putting it out into the world. It was just making music, having fun with it, working with other artists. But I feel pretty ready to get back out there at this point and just contribute to, music again. Just put it out there.
So this will be... How many albums do you have before this? Is this solo, or this is with Fred? So
this is with Fred. Fred and I, in Forever Losing Sleep, put out 1 full-length album. We put out an EP, and then we had a couple of like splits and like solo songs that went out and got pressed to vinyl. But this would be like our first collection of like full-length albums and EPs that we've released since 2018.
So Forever Losing Sleep, what kind of band is that again?
Forever Losing Sleep was like a emo, post-rock, post-hardcore band, and we were in that from 2012 until 2018.
So in 6 years you have 1 LP, 1 EP.
We did 1 LP, 1 EP, a bunch of different like singles.
Is that kind of the nature of that music?
I think it was the nature of yeah, I would say. I think that for us, like, we got caught in this cycle of just like touring a lot. And we, in 2012, put out like our first batch of singles and a couple of tracks, and they had all kind of picked up after... like Forever Losing Sleep formed after an old band broke up. So
okay.
We had a pop punk band called FLS that turned into Forever Losing Sleep.
Oh, okay. Is that what that meant?
It's not what it meant. Like, we were like 18 years old, and there was honestly this dude who made really silly like YouTube videos called Frank L. Sharp.
Okay.
And we just thought he was funny, and Frank L. Sharp, FLS,
Sure.
had no idea what to do with our name at the time. Half of our band was in like high school. I was 19, and FLS was like just like a young angsty pop punk kind of thing, and it took off really well in New Jersey. We played a lot of shows. We did our first tour as FLS, and after coming back from that first tour as FLS, the bulk of us knew we wanted to do a lot of touring and really like sink ourselves into it, but weren't really feeling the music. The singer we had at the time just wasn't working out, so we decided I would start singing, because at that time I was writing all the songs and this other singer would sing.
Okay.
So Forever Losing Sleep kind of just took it from there, and...
so you're 19?
19.
So you're going to college?
No, I never went to college.
Is anyone going to college in this equation?
Josh, who, was going to college, and... Fred initially was going to college. He was going to college for music, studying upright bass.
And did you manage to make this financially viable, this project?
Not at all.
No?
It was something that by the end, like, we could go on a tour and come back with like $3,000 or $4,000, but... Collectively. So it wasn't like I walked away with $3,000 or $4,000 bucks. It was like the band had $3,000 or $4,000 after a tour, which felt good after years of just really like investing in it. But the sustainability of it was just not something I think you could do long term unless you really started to see income.
So 6 years of that, about, roughly?
6 years of that. Did about 400 plus shows, 35 tours. Tours could be anywhere from like a extended weekend of like 4 or 5 days all the way up to 30, 40 days.
And why did you stop doing that?
It's burnt out and broke.
Yeah, sure.
So,
Did you still like the music?
honestly,
Do
not-
you still like the music? Like today?
like the music of Forever Losing
Yeah,
Sleep?
yeah, sure.
You know, I think I look back at it through like a lens of just like empathy for like my younger self. Like I was 19 years old. I wrote very angsty music. It was like a coming of age album for me. So like I think the way I articulated my emotions was very different than how I would now, of course, being 31.
Mm-hmm. But
But
do you want to listen to it?
every once in a while,
Yeah.
I turn it on, and I'm proud of what I did in the past and who I did it with and what we accomplished just being, you know, small band from New Jersey, just hustling.
And now the music that you make is not of that nature.
No, not of that nature. I'd say Fred and I still pop into that style every once in a while, and Fred has always really been like my writing partner, so where I've always focused on creating like a universe and in like that a song can exist within, and trying to get the lyrical content and chordal content, just the sounds, the scapes, to all kind of come together. Fred always really would match the music to the vocals and the story, and so we'll find ourselves making like dark music every once in a while, but I found it liberating to leave the band and just start writing however I felt that day and doing what felt good, rather than sitting down on a guitar and thinking like whatever comes out is for Forever Losing Sleep, and Forever Losing Sleep is this kind of band. And it was just very like constricting, and I found the mindset to be limiting at a certain point. So breaking out of that and getting into synthesizers was, like, Fred and I always call it like a musical like renaissance for us. It was just entirely liberating, and we went from making like every song just dark or sad or explosive to like today is a pop song, tomorrow's an R&B song. I work with rappers now. I work with, you know, whatever it is.
Because there's less limitation?
Less limitation, and I think like we as people are just like, you know, fluid. Every day you feel how you feel, and your art can reflect that, or whatever your current stream of conscious is. And when you're making art with a goal, I felt like it just lost its like free flowing nature.
But now I assume you crave the goal again, if you want to put out something.
No, not really.
No?
Now I feel like a lot more aligned with just like jazz and the process of like refinement and critiquing your work. So like I'd say as a musician now, I mostly focus on the feeling. Like, do I feel good while making this? If I look up while I'm playing and I'm in a room with 3 other people and all of us are, you know, banging our head or shaking our ass a little bit, I believe in that as the thing that will transfer and translate to others. Like, rather than sit down and say, I'd love for this record to do well and for it to be well received and to be able to take it and go out on tour. Like, that feels dirty to me at this point. Like, I just want to feel excited about the music I'm making and make music that I want to hear. And then I do believe that is what translates through speakers to other people, and they receive that.
Mm-hmm. So would you go on tour with this particular material?
I'd love to.
But you're just saying the priorities are different?
Priorities are different. I find myself thinking more so about how I can help others at this point, after getting to play 400 plus shows and do a lot of traveling. Like, I know what it takes and what it takes out of you. And I get a lot of enjoyment just writing songs with other people and kind of serving a purpose for them and helping their vision come to light.
Yeah, it's tricky because sometimes when your motives are more external, you just get more done. And that isn't always a good or a bad thing. But yeah, I don't know how to feel about it. When I had motives that were more juvenile and simple, just trying to get this publisher to look at me or whatever, to just try to get some money in the door, I made more work for sure, I think. And I don't know if it's worse. I don't know what's carried over in the work, because I think someone could really enjoy making something, and it can just be horrible.
Absolutely.
Like a hippie on a boardwalk with tie-dye paintings. They think it's great. They felt it was great. You don't feel that. And so there's a lot of complexity that goes into that translation, I think. Sometimes doing what you don't want to do in the art-making process is necessary, I think. So it isn't. Maybe you can get over that hump, technically speaking, at a certain age. But how do you feel about doing things you don't want to do within that music? Like, in other words, if you experience a moment of dismay or writer's block, that's, for me, like the crux. How an artist deals with writer's block tells you a lot about them, I would say.
Yeah. So for me, music is like the ultimate shit sandwich I love eating. Like, I think in anything you do, whether it be a job or like relationship, like there's always a shit sandwich that comes with that respective thing. And I like to ask myself, like, is this the flavor of shit sandwich I like? Like, and it is. Like, if something comes up with music, or like I can't get the right sounds, or I'm going through a period where I'm not outputting, like, it's still the thing that I love coming back to. And I think with time I've learned to just know that, like, this is a lifelong journey I'm on. And I've gone through periods of time where I won't write a song for a year, and then I've written like 35 songs in a month, and like not just like loops, like fully fleshed out tracks front to back that my soul in some way, shape, or form felt connected to enough to remember these songs. And I like to think about it like, now if I'm going through like a quote-unquote writer's block, I try to reframe it and envision it as like I'm going through a phase of collection. And have you ever heard of these 4 phases? We've got collection, creation, you've then got editing or critiquing, and then you've got promotion. And I think most artists like those first 3 phases quite a lot, especially the first 2. Although the first one could be a little iffy if you're not patient and comfortable with not creating it.
Collecting?
Collecting.
No, that all makes sense. I never heard of it systematized, but that's probably how I would categorize it. I do think they can happen simultaneously or in big chunks.
Totally.
It's just hard to know. It isn't always clear to me. Maybe we have a different relationship to our feelings, but I don't know when to trust or when not to trust it. Because I'm a little more suspicious, I think, of that feeling. Even if this drawing felt good. I mean, if you take an extreme example, I feel like people will say, oh, I took mushrooms and I made this drawing and it was amazing when I made it. And then it would look like garbage the next day. And that's obviously an extreme circumstance, but it just points to the fact that making something appealing and attractive for others is very complex. I think making things that you like as an individual is not that complicated. But it doesn't always mean it's the ultimate expression of one's self. That may sound contradictory, but I think obviously people find themselves through others and service to others in general. And I don't think art differs too much.
Yeah.
But art can become therapy away from the world and all those things. And then I start to understand, yeah, okay, I get that the priorities shift. But I think everyone's always looking for a holistic expression. even including promotion. That's a difficult one, but
Yeah.
some artists want to forsake that completely. I would love to, but it's just an essential part of that process, and that's where you get to know the other people more, I think, what they like. But obviously artists are, and you kind of made mention of it earlier, if they're very heavy-handed in what the other wants or promotion, there's something unattractive about that.
Yeah. I think, like, at least in my experience with it, like, Forever Losing Sleep was such, like, a intimate band. Like, the first album we wrote was, like, about, I would call it, like, a really, like, a coming-of-age album, but for me it was, like, the first time I had tried to articulate, like, my father passing away and at the age of 14, and then the affects of that on, like, my mom and watching her go through all of those experiences. And in a very beautiful way, like, putting something so vulnerable out there attracted a lot of vulnerability back. And I feel super blessed and fortunate to, like, have traveled the country even in a pretty small band and have people show up that drove 3 or 4 hours away that say things like, this album is the only thing that understands me right now, and it helped me get through this really rough patch. Or I'll never forget this mom and daughter who came out to a show, and their dad, her husband, had cancer, and this album to them was the only thing that made sense in the world at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
And through, you know, sharing and being vulnerable, in a sense, the reflection that returns is also a sense of being understood, because people do receive it and then, you know, regurgitate it back to you what it means to them.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that also is something that was kind of scary, like being 21 years old and people say, like, this album saved my life. Like, that's an amazing compliment, but then also it's like every time you sit at a guitar, it's like, does this song need to save somebody's life, or could this song be a C major into a F major?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, fair enough.
And that's what it is.
Right. I don't know. I don't have that answer. I don't think it needs to.
No.
But I think some artists are really good at encountering that pressure and doubling down and doubling down. I don't know how they do it per se, but they must somehow understand the internal mechanisms that created the thing.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas a lot of artists, for better or for worse, don't actually understand how they made the thing, which is fine. Most good art, I don't think the artist knows what's happening. But professionals, I would say, and it's tricky, but they know somehow how to duplicate spontaneity at a given moment. That's what I would say a professional is. The ultimate professional. Not in some corporate sense, but that you could show up on a stage at an appointed time and channel spontaneity. Or that you have an illustration assignment, it has to be done in 6 hours. Yeah. And it's not about how you feel or what you want to do today. It's about this thing, in service of this thing. So it is there's trade-offs to each approach, to each priority, I would say.
Absolutely. I think it's valuable as a musician to have each one of those tools on your tool belt, depending on, you know, how it is you work and whom you work with. But if you choose to be a producer, you definitely can't find yourself in the comfort of, like, I do just want to write how I feel today, or just do something that feels good, because somebody may put something on your desk that's like, this must sound like 90s R&B meets, like, industrial techno. And you're like,
right.
What the hell is this? All right, let's go. I'm now in service to this. And
is that you became a producer after ending this band?
Yeah, that was when I really jumped into production, producing, working with a lot of other artists and helping them with their music and songwriting.
And were they coming to you? Well, in other words, did they expect you to produce things that you had made? Or did they simply know that you had technical knowledge about something?
I think it was a little bit of both. Like, being like a multi-instrumentalist and then also having your hands in the recording process definitely helps. A lot of producers are kind of put in a box of just working digitally, where a lot of them can, draw MIDI notes and they can make beautiful songs, but they don't really play instruments outside of the computer screen. And you find people that come in and they say, like, this song must have a piano, but, like, I want to hear and feel the piano. I don't want, like, a digital version of this piano.
So in that instance, you would play the piano?
Yeah, so I'd play the piano, I'd write the tracks, and it always happens differently, which is why I love music. But my favorite thing about songwriting is when somebody comes in and they've already got an a cappella. Like, they have some sense of melody, they have some sense of, like, what the key of the song might be in already, and they don't know what the key is, they're just expressing and singing. But then for me, I can sit down and be like, oh, this is in G minor, and this feels right. And then I can just ask, like, does this feel right? I play a chord, oh, that does feel right. I play another chord, not quite. All right, like, what's chord 2? Now we're on to our next task. We hit a wall, we can find a solution, and then just keep it moving. And then, what's the tempo feel like? Does this feel right? Is it a double time thing? Is it a half time thing? And then quickly, we've got in sometimes 15 minutes, like a fully outlined song that might not be perfect, but the song is there. Now we can critique it and get it to be where, we all feel it is a good song. Because if you can get out of your own way in the creation phase and just focus on the creation, you can then always filter back through what you've created and be brutally honest with yourself and say, like, the chorus going into the bridge, that's a terrible transition. Like, all momentum stops there. What could we do? Does it need a drum fill? Do we need a new chord to make a really cool transition? And then it's like going into your tool belt and thinking, what does this need? What has worked?
So you started off working with people in a more emo, hardcore punk fashion? Is that correct?
Not quite. Like, once I stopped doing the emo, hardcore punk thing, I really started playing a lot of synthesizers and pretty much, like, entirely put down the guitar.
Okay.
So even until today, I started on guitar, I did all my touring on guitar, and now I am, like, an absolutely terrible guitar player because I just don't pick the guitar up.
But how did you attract people who wanted to be produced if you were not kind of piggybacking on this former
So a lot
endeavor?
of it came from, like, networking, just talking with people and putting myself out there. Having the equipment was a huge thing, like having access to certain synthesizers that I have is definitely something pretty desirable for a lot of musicians. And then just being open and, knowing how to work with people and make them feel safe is what I would say has often attracted people. Like, I've found myself mostly working with women. And a lot of the feedback I've gotten from working with women is that they usually don't feel safe or creative working in studio spaces because there usually comes a turning point where it goes from a professional relationship to some guy trying to hit on them or sleep with them or flirt with them, and now, it's no longer about making art.
Right.
Where for me, it's, first and foremost about serving this person's process and their desired outcome. So,
And where was this occurring?
I started really producing in Pennsylvania. I moved to Pennsylvania in 2018 after Forever Losing Sleep broke up. I was living in Woodland Park and started acquiring studio equipment while I was living in Woodland Park, New Jersey. And pretty much right as the band broke up, I sold a bunch of my vintage amps and bought a bunch of synthesizers. We got our first laptop, started cracking all of our software and plugins and digital audio workstations and just learning. And once I got out to Pennsylvania, put a couple pictures up of our space, and like young 18 and 19-year-old rappers were really the first groups of people that I would produce for. And working with them was interesting because their standards are very low. Half of them are like ripping beats off of YouTube.
Like
And-
technical standards.
Like technical standards are low, so
Okay.
it was a great learning opportunity
Sure.
to say, like, let me record you, let me maybe use somebody else's track that was already done, and now we get to work on mixing these things together. But we would work with enough rappers and then find like, oh, this one person out of this group of 5 people is incredibly dedicated, is really talented, and has potential. And then it would be like, hey, like, I mean, you see all the other instruments in the room. Do you want to like make something more catered to you? Like, what's the sound that you wish to put out into the world? And from there, we could usually, take it and roll with it. So there was a rapper.
What's the financial structure of all that? I don't quite understand if that's... is it an hourly rate in a situation like this? Is it a percentage?
So you could go either of those directions. You can straight up just go hourly, and you're really just providing your service. You can do what's called a back end deal, and if an artist doesn't really have any money for something up front, there's a point system, and depending on how many points you get as a producer would kind of determine the percentage you get in like back end royalties. So like, let's say you really believe in an artist and you think that the music you put out together is going to do well, you might say, everything on the forefront is pro bono, but everything on the backside is where I will get my payment.
Okay.
But I would usually, I'm a fan of working on like a set price. I don't really like being in a studio setting, and at least from my side of things, like if I'm the one recording, I don't like looking at the clock every 5 minutes and thinking like, oh shit, I'm just trying to get the right guitar tone, and I spent the last 30 minutes getting this guitar tone. Because those details are really important. So I would rather just tell somebody like, hey, like, this track is going to cost X. And if we go beyond, a period of time within reason, we might need to renegotiate that. Or talk more about back-end things, or whatever it is for that respective situation. But that's usually how I would roll in Pennsylvania, especially while learning. So you might say, hey, this track to write, produce, mix, and master will be, $500, $1,000. When you're first starting off, of course, it's going to be lower. You just want to get your work out there.
Did you manage to find some kind of financial stability via production versus touring?
Yeah, production was probably where I'd say I got my first real, like, sense of, like, oh, I could make money daily and see it come in. So while I was running my studio, I'd say there were moments in time that we were pulling in like $400 or $500 a day, and then you'd get little bonuses from back end work, and oh, we just did a mix for somebody that's an extra X amount of dollars.
So you were running it was your studio?
It was my studio in Bangor, Pennsylvania, and my friend Fred ran it with me. And for the 3 years I was out there, I wasn't working any other job. I really was just running my studio. And then to supplement income in general, and really build the studio, I was doing a lot of gear flipping. So that was really how I made the bulk of my money. I had a 6-car garage, and I converted the entire first floor of my house into a recording studio. So I had a big control room where I could fit like 20, 30 people in the room, and we could all listen and monitor and hear whoever is performing in the other room. And then we had a live room that was like fully soundproofed, and we'd keep all of our drums, vocal booth, all of our guitar amps and everything in there. And then had a good storage room for all the extra drums and miscellaneous gear that you got to keep neat. And I believe every studio should have a room where the people that are not currently working and are focused can go and just fuck off, go play some video games, eat some lunch, and get out of the way of everybody else who's really trying to be attentive right now. So we had a room like that with N64s and
Mm-hmm.
cool stuff. But
And why did that come to an end?
so COVID hit, and when COVID hit, we had to shut the studio down when the lockdown occurred. And then we were renting our house from our landlord who lived out of state at the time, and as soon as COVID hit, he really got pretty nervous and scared and just immediately wanted to sell. And through the initial period of lockdown, we were locked down, so he couldn't sell. So it gave us about like a 3 to 6 month buffer, but at that point we were no longer really taking sessions, and we're just really, trying to survive at that point. So all income halted. I still was doing my best to flip gear, but even that was a different world. People don't really want to meet you, or all the estate sales stopped, auctions stopped. So once he sold the house, I moved back to New Jersey in 2020, late 2020.
With no desire to do that again, that type of project.
I think for the first year I was back, there was a part of me that really thought I would end up in Pennsylvania again. Like, I love Pennsylvania. I love the mountains. I love the trees. I love, like, the freedom of going outside and just thinking, like, I could scream at the top of my lungs. I could run around naked. And,
Right.
Nobody could tell me shit.
It's cheap.
It's cheap, man. It's
Yeah.
cheap. Yeah, we paid $15.50 for a 4-bedroom house on an acre with a 6-car garage and, like, a 15-car driveway.
That's beautiful.
It was amazing. But I think that until I linked up with you and Matt, that really was my desire to head back to PA and rebuild over there. But coming here, meeting both of you, the wood shop, and especially once the Williams Center came to be, I saw it as a viable option to stay and put down roots over here and kind of leave that behind and just call it another journey I had gone through.
Right. Yeah, another chapter. Yeah, COVID did that for a lot of people. That's a shame, though. It sounds like you had something going there.
It was fun.
Sounds like you were rolling. It sounds like an interesting environment, fun environment.
It's very fun. I love working with rappers, like speaking to like letting go as an artist and just showing up and like ultimate spontaneity. Like, these kids would show up, the first thing they do is like pull out like a pound of weed and put it on your table, and while they're rolling their joints, they're just like, what beat are we rapping over today? It's like they're at a studio session, they're already paying me for my time, they're not recording, they don't even know what they're recording yet, and they're just like, yo, Joe, could you pull this beat up? And they'll just listen and freestyle for a few minutes, and then they'll be like, yeah, this one is it. Put it in Ableton. I'm running into the booth. And
Was that indicative of all rappers?
I wouldn't say
Or many?
all rappers, but I especially think the new wave of rappers are very much about just like the output and not overthinking what it is they're saying. And I think we hear it too.
No, I think that
for damn sure.
I think Kanye's partially to blame, for better or for worse, because he's just said some things that are just feel really immediate in songs. That many come to my mind that are so goofy and strange that I could never imagine a rock band having that in a song, because I would just assume that they were much more structured and considerate of those kind of details.
Absolutely. It was always a pure wild card sitting on the other side of the speakers and just thinking like, he just said fucking what? And then, half the time they'll do a line, run it back. and like it's like a fucking machine. Like you're like firing off on this DAW, like just record, run it back, record, run it back, record, run it back. And usually it's like they'll spit a line, and some rappers were good and could flow for a whole verse, or you know, get like 6 bars out and then say, okay, shit, I hit a wall, run it back. And then they would literally just listen to whatever they just said, have no idea, and just do what's called a punch in and just tune right in. So if the last word they said was word, they're just rhyming with word. And they hop right into bar 7 and see if they can get to bar 8. And some rappers literally would do bar 1, you run it back. Bar 1 leads to bar 2, you run it back. And they would go 1 bar at a time. And you end up with something super mismatched, like that I feel like at the end you usually have to have them go back and repeat it all. Now that they've, you know, gotten all of it out, and there's a verse, there's a chorus. I'd usually would be like, all right, if you really like this song or care about it, like come back into the room now for like 10 minutes, just listen to it. Like remember what you said, and then go back in and say it with some more confidence now. But amazing how people, especially from the world I come from, where it's like every note you would put so much weight on, and you'd think about all these things, and you've got 5 or 6 people collecting their thoughts and minds and souls to put music together, and then these guys just show up and they're like, they speed run 12 tracks in a day.
Right. I'm conflicted by it because on one hand, immediacy and spontaneity is charming, but it also lends itself towards disposability over time.
Yeah.
You know, I'm trying to think what quote-unquote masterpieces would have fallen into such a category, and I don't think there are any. Because I think, I mean, even if you want to take like Kendrick Lamar, there's like a density of compression of thought and time that almost makes it feel impossible, the nature of the song, because there has been that attention put into it. So yeah, in that sense, it's just fast food versus an actual meal, I think. And I think it's unavoidably so that this would be true.
Yeah, sometimes fast food gives you a big dopamine hit. And,
Sure.
You know, it's good for the night, or it's good for the week or whatever, but not always sustainable. Yeah. And one thing I've always loved, though, and I've tried to like take from the rappers is I've heard this term that's like, your freestyles should sound like writtens, and your writtens should sound like freestyles. And like just taking the essence of not taking yourself so seriously, I think is a really just like useful tool to have, even if you're not moving with that at the forefront of your, you know, your motion. Like just knowing rappers don't give a shit and do pump out 12 songs in a day. It's like, all right, maybe I am overthinking this song. Maybe I can blow through this. Maybe I could freestyle through it and land somewhere I never thought I would land. And just being open to really anything, even if it's bad. I would hear these guys say garbage lines all the time, and they would just be like, is that valid? That was always their question. And half the guys in the other room would either say, yeah, that was valid, and they'd keep it moving on to the next bar, or they'd be like, not good, man, run it back. So, hey, if you feel like it's valid and you didn't think too hard on it, you know, sometimes just keep it moving.
Yeah, no, I understand. You have to take steps forward, or you'll never make anything. But with the emergence of AI, I think artists are going to really need to figure out what constitutes a sacred work of art, because AI is going to be able to pump out bullshit endlessly.
Yeah,
that's as disposable, probably more convincing, etc.
It's pretty amazing already with music.
Yeah, until you're going to get squeezed to the 0.1% that makes you a human in that process. So it's a strange time to make anything, I would say.
Yeah.
But that's an interesting process to hear about. I could see how that would liberate you from your particular weight as a course correction.
For sure.
But it seems like the other extreme of one thing.
It was great contrast,
Yeah.
especially in my personal experience, having been so caught up in like this music must mean something to somebody because that's what feedback I get on this music.
Mm-hmm.
It almost became an expectation of people, like, oh, Forever Losing Sleep makes this sad, deep, intimate music, and we did. But I'm not always a sad, deep, and intimate person. Like, some days you just want to fucking laugh, or tell a bad fart joke, or
Mhm.
whatever it is, and dance, or have fun. Like, think about the good things. And you need it all, so it was really good contrast for me and totally helped me develop past a lot of those roadblocks I felt like I had hit in that past chapter.
Mm-hmm. And prior to Forever Losing Sleep, what age did you start making music, or did you have interest in music?
I didn't really have interest in making music until I was like 16, 15 or 16. I love how I started playing music. I think it's hilarious.
Mhm.
I was at the gym one day and...
What kind of gym?
Like a muscle-making gym.
Like weightlifting? Yeah.
Pumping iron.
Okay, you were pumping iron.
And I was like 16. It's after school one day, and there was a dude who was a senior while I was a sophomore. And he just was like, dude, you want to come play Guitar Hero at my house after the gym?
Mm-hmm.
I was like, sure thing, man. I've never played. And I went over, I watched him play. He played on expert and crushed it, and I fumbled through every single note on like easy mode and was just like, nah, like I gotta get this down. This is really cool. And just like clicking the guitar to the rhythm intuitively made sense to me, and went home, bought it, played for like a month straight, and then got really good at it and was like, I need a real guitar. I just want to play guitar now. So
Did he play guitar?
He didn't.
Yeah, I was going to say, because this is not always the case.
No, it just kind of naturally went that way, and
And Guitar Hero has an aesthetic, right?
I would say so.
Like it skews towards a certain...
It was very like rock daddy,
Right.
you know, rock star kind of vibe to it.
But that wasn't the music you were listening to.
No, I think I was, especially at that time, I don't even think I knew what I liked, like music-wise. I wasn't into like alternative musics yet. I mostly listened to like hip-hop and R&B on the radio.
Right, whatever was out there.
Whatever was out there. LimeWire was no more, so my music, like, digging days of my youth were kind of gone at this point. Like, we're in that mid
Mm-hmm.
period of time where like MySpace was a thing still, and
So guitar is the foundation of your musical knowledge.
yeah, guitar is the foundation. And I'd say if I were to like really, really go back in time, I think poetry would be the very first.
You mean writing it or reading it?
I'd say writing it.
Yeah.
I think about like one of the first school prompts I ever had to write a poem, and I remember reading the poem out loud and in class, and as I was reading it, the cadence became very musical. Like there was a rhythm to the words, and I didn't realize it at the time, but when I look back at it, I was like, I think that might be the first song I ever wrote, or the first, you know, like essence of a song I ever wrote. And yeah, once I had a vessel of guitar, the words kind of soon, you know, came to follow. But I didn't even really consider singing until I was like 18 or 19.
Mm.
So a couple years after playing guitar and getting enough chops up on the guitar to even really hold it down or think about constructing a song.
But clearly you were not trained classically in any sense.
No training.
Or music theory, etc.
No, just ultimate guitar tab was Old Faithful back in the day.
And Guitar Hero.
And Guitar Hero. And
But have you since studied music theory, or are you not interested?
I love music theory. Now, especially over the past 2 years, that's been probably like the biggest focus of mine. I feel like songwriting is something I've done so much of at this point that I feel confident in knowing that's just like this lifelong journey, and it'll always evolve, it'll always change. But music theory is like your vocabulary and how you can articulate these stories and universes. And finding myself on synthesizers made it so I could build universes via sound. I didn't have to be
Right.
musically articulate. My sounds could be articulate enough to bring us to this other place.
Mm-hmm.
But now my biggest interest is being able to paint with those chords and to be able to say, like, you feel, like, intrigued, you feel promiscuous, and a chord can make that feeling occur. And so yeah, the last 2 years have been a lot of piano music theory and diving into it, but I still don't really read music. It's more of theory rather than reading. So understanding patterns and concepts and maybe like systems and structures, I see a lot of it in patterns. That's how my mind really breaks it down.
No, that makes sense. And so you're going to put out, you have 3 albums on the back burner,
Mm-hmm.
and your intent is to do what with those?
At this point, I really just want to put them together and release them.
And under what name or identity?
So Fred and I, after Forever Losing Sleep, called our next project Identity Shift.
Okay.
And that project, we've only released 2 songs under in the past, 6 years, but we haven't really been focused on it. It's just something we did kind of for ourselves to, I don't know, maybe have some kind of, feeling we were still doing it in some way. Hey,
Yeah,
we
sure,
could put
sure.
something out to Spotify. And but at this point, I feel really ready to hop back into the process of making an album, which is a big process. It's like the first album is 15 songs, and I've been going through the process of trying to get the flow right on it. So I feel like when I let song 1 through 8 play, I feel like just intuitively it feels right. I absolutely love the flow of song 1 into song 2 into song 3 into song 4, so on. And then by the time we hit song 8, there's this moment now where I'm finding myself like, okay, I have this massive catalog of music and I'm trying to figure out how to get the album to feel cohesive, and it can take these different detours into different places sonically, and how do you make all of that kind of flow and come together. And on top of that, there's all these different eras now. Like, I haven't really officially put music out for 2018, so 6 years, something like that. So even songs I wrote 5 years ago now are maybe new to the world, but they're very old to me.
Right.
And different eras, there's groupings of songs that sound like spring, or sound like a specific moment in time, because that's what I was living. And now it's like, how do you weave all these things together in a way that feels still good to you today, and also doesn't dismiss who you were when you wrote these songs.
Sure. Yeah, I understand what you mean.
Kind of in the same essence of what we were talking about, writing songs at 19 and being very angsty and coming of age, versus how I might articulate those feelings now. It's like even 5 years of difference is enough time to say a different human wrote those songs.
Yeah, I think a lot of artists should be grateful they haven't seen large-scale success, because that forces you to become Trent Reznor or some shit, or Katy Perry, who they kind of get frozen in a particular moment of success. In the instance of Katy Perry, I always found it funny that a lot of her songs feel like, or are written from a high school party perspective.
Yeah.
And she seems like she's about at that level of consciousness, if I'm being honest. Trent Reznor, I don't listen to Nine Inch Nails much, but there was a moment where I started looking at how old people were when they made certain albums that I listened to in high school, and I felt it was embarrassing for them.
Interesting.
Even a band like Alkaline Trio, who has some good albums, mostly the first album that's just all the old stuff. But
yeah, I love those albums.
it's just they or Cursive. I used to listen to Cursive a lot, and it's very odd to have a quote unquote brand, or because a band is effectively a brand of a particular facet of the individuals. It requires more fodder, usually negative, or drama, to continue to make that type of music or sound.
Yeah.
And succeeding financially, it just doubles down on that. You have to be that. The opposite isn't great either, finding no success, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
So there are very few artists, but I think they exist, that can navigate all those moments of their lives honestly. I mean, I think it's very rare. I'm not even... Maybe Kanye's in this category again. Because if you look across his discography, it's like you see some very dark and some very light moments.
Yeah.
In a pretty honest way. But in that sense, what do you hope to, outside of the feeling good about what gets put out, what would you hope to see from these 3 albums when they enter into the world?
I'd really hope to see myself playing it with other musicians that I find inspiring. That's usually when I'm most excited. Like, I love the feeling of being in a room with people that I know are 10 times as talented as I am.
Sure.
And,
yeah.
It makes it so I've got to level up. And our boy Ego's in the house. So I'd love to see, us get the opportunity to play with other talented instrumentalists and musicians. And I'm very excited at the thought of building a band again, to that same notion. I think just having that, like, brotherhood and that, like, familial aspect of doing something together.
Sure.
Is really powerful, and I think can keep you pretty accountable too when you've got other people involved. And outside of that, I love traveling, and I'd say I really miss traveling. This is probably
touring or traveling?
Both.
Yeah.
I think
they seem different in some sense.
they're very different. I do love touring because you get to meet, like, an astronomical amount of people. You get to see so much, but you don't get to see it for very long. And you don't get to see them for very long. So it's almost bittersweet.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I woke up in St. Louis. I went to sleep in Ohio. I wake up in Ohio. I go to sleep in, Pittsburgh. It's like every day you're just moving through so much space and time. But you make these relationships that it makes no sense. You meet somebody for a day, and, like, this thing that you both met on the behalf of connects you as if you've been friends forever.
Mm-hmm.
And I show up in Ohio, and I've got a place to sleep on someone's floor, and food, and a really good friend. So, like, that aspect of it has always been incredibly humbling. I think especially coming from New Jersey, where we kind of have that underlying thought that people are maybe not so friendly and kind and hospitable here.
Mm-hmm.
Touring really teaches you that that's not true. Like, people are amazing, people take care of you, and I'm really grateful that I've even had those experiences and just have the desire for more of that. But traveling since stopping touring has been, I think, a really amazing experience where you get to, like, sink into a space now. Like, in the past, I had only ever been to LA for 2 days at a time.
Yeah.
But now I've been for a week. Or I've lived in Florida for 3 months. Spent at least a week and a half in Pittsburgh. So it's like you get to have, like, a flow with a city and a new intimacy. And I definitely look forward to moments like that. So maybe I'd say to pull it full circle with the albums and working with other musicians and traveling, I'd love to see that turn into more production work, and maybe saying I will go out to Minnesota for a month and write an album with this group of people and get to live and experience the place as if I am there, and
Yeah, that makes sense.
create within it.
It sounds like most of your goals related to art are about intimacy and connection, so that would make sense.
Yeah, people, people and places, and good food.
Yeah. Okay, we should get back to work.
We always got work to do.
Well, we should briefly explain what you do at the Williams Center,
Yes.
as that's your current occupation.
That is my current role. So Michael and I both have been developing the Williams Center in Rutherford, New Jersey for past 3-ish years at this point. And I'm currently the music director at the Williams Center, and the beginning of our journey was spent mostly just cleaning out the building and renovating it and painting it and putting love into it, and now we spend most of our days programming it and keeping it clean and trying to work out all the kinks of running something that is
Yeah, learning. Learning's a big part of it.
oh man.
I mean, but there's a continuation, a thread in the sense of the den is it's kind of effectively your production spot, right?
Yeah,
I don't know if it's quite got there yet, but
I would say it's to be truthful, I actually would say it's my favorite room I've ever gotten to produce in.
oh yeah,
It's got
why is that?
a couple different reasons. The shape of it is really unique. It's shaped unlike any other room I've ever worked in. Like there's no symmetry in the room really.
Yeah, no,
And-
that's a theme of the building, I would say, in some ways.
And then the material, like it's mostly concrete, and I happen to love the tonal characteristics of concrete.
That makes sense.
It's a great room in that way, but just knowing that it took like I think about 3 months of time and a massive group of people coming together to clean the room, get all the garbage out of the room, I think we literally swept, shop vac, and mopped that room like 5 to 10 times until we could paint the floors.
Mm.
And there must have been at least 15 to 20 people that came in and helped paint and, really sweat in that room. And so many of them would say they didn't even understand where the room was going, because you remember the room and what it
Yeah,
looked
yeah.
like. And to come out on the other side of it and know that we now record albums in the room, we record live sessions in the room, and we do more like community-based shows in the room, I'm just really grateful for it all. And the room sounds awesome.
Yeah, and so people can reach you to do that, right? They
Yeah.
can reach out to you.
People could reach out at jkelly@williamscenter.co and send an email to either record or inquire about playing a show with us at the Williams Center.
People can do that. They can do whatever they want.
You can. It's your life.
Kinda.
Until AI takes it over and replaces us.
All right. Well, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Music by Dory Bavarsky and Mingja Chen. Next up, let's see what happens. I'm not sure. Have a good week.